Blade and Underworld, The Crimson Rift. Chapter 1, Echoes of Time. New York was a playground for the supernatural, with its skyscrapers that touched the heavens and alleys that knew nothing of daylight. Blade, the half-vampire, half-human hybrid, had always found it the perfect hunting ground. And New York City after dark was a different beast entirely. Its towering skyscrapers were not just architectural marvels, but monuments hiding the paranormal activities of the city. Hidden alleys, secret doors, and ancient basements held secrets that the average New Yorker would never comprehend. The city had a pulse, and if you listened closely, it whispered tales of blood, betrayal, and creatures of the night. Blade's motorcycle roared through the streets, a black phantom cutting through the neon-lit avenues. Every so often, he would pass a building with a barely noticeable sigil marking it as a safe haven for vampires or another supernatural entity. The Daywalker knew them all, having either infiltrated or raided most of them. As he approached the meatpacking district, a voice crackled in his earpiece. "Blade, you're getting close. I've been hearing chatter about this Valentine guy for a while now." Blade smirked, recognizing the gruff voice of Whistler, his mentor and armorer. "What's the word, old man?" Whistler's chuckle was audible. "This ain't your regular vamp party, kid. Word is, Valentine's crew ain't just biting. They're recruiting, turning every poor soul they can grab." Blade revved his engine, weaving through traffic. "Recruitment drive, huh? They're young, brash, and think they're invincible," Whistler warned. "Got themselves holed up in a nightclub. Figure it's a statement. They're not hiding." Blade grinned. "Neither am I." Whistler continued. "From what I gathered, Valentine's a showman, likes the theatrics, and he's got something planned for tonight." "Naturally," Blade mused. "Guess I'll be the unannounced act." Whistler laughed. "Just don't let the spotlight get to your head." Blade approached the nightclub, the thumping bass audible from blocks away. "Showtime," he murmured, parking his bike and heading inside, ready for the next act. Inside, the neon lights of the nightclub cast a surreal glow over the dance floor. Patrons, lost in the music's trance, moved like shadows under the strobes. Among them was Blade, a silent predator amidst a sea of unsuspecting prey. With his iconic sunglasses shielding his eyes, he scanned the pulsating crowd in the nightclub. The bass from the music matched the thumping of human hearts, but to Blade there was another sound, a sinister rhythm that called out to him, the beat of a vampire heart. A newly formed gang of vampires, led by a particularly nasty piece of work named Valentine, had set up shop in this club. Valentine, a tower of muscle nearly 7 feet tall with his long platinum, blonde hair and snake like green eyes, was said to have a taste for the theatrics. Tonight, he lounged in a VIP booth surrounded by his loyalists. Blade's eyes zeroed in on a group in the corner. A young woman, her skin pallid and her eyes wide with fear, was being cornered. The vampire holding her had a tattoo of a heart pierced with a dagger, Valentine's signature mark. In a fluid motion, Blade drew one of his silver stakes and threw it, striking the vampire right in the heart. Before the creature could even register what happened, he turned to dust, leaving the woman startled but unharmed. Blade didn't skip a beat. With his sword unsheathed, he moved gracefully, a dance of death amidst the chaos of the club's beats. Vampires lunged at him, only to be met with swift and fatal slashes. The blade hummed, almost in tune with the music, severing limbs and heads. Valentine, realizing the direness of the situation, rose from his seat. "Blade!" Always crashing the party uninvited, he shouted with a twisted smile, drawing 2 curved daggers. Blade shot back. Your kind isn't known for sending out invites. Figured I'd drop in." The two clashed in the center of the dance floor. Valentine, for all his arrogance, was fast. His daggers danced around Blade, trying to find an opening. "You can't win, Blade. My gang, my rules." Blade chuckled, deflecting a blow. "You might have a new gang, but it's the same old song and dance." Sparks flew as steel met steel. The two moved in a violent ballet, each one trying to gain the upper hand. At one point, Valentine managed to cut Blade's arm, but the Daywalker only smirked. "Is that all you got?" Using his other gadgets, Blade deployed a UAV, flash grenade. The intense burst of ultraviolet light blinded Valentine momentarily. Taking advantage, Blade swung his sword with full force, cleanly beheading the vampire leader. With a swift kick, Blade sent Valentine's headless body crashing through the nightclub's glass door and onto the street outside. The remaining vampires, seeing their leader defeated seemingly effortlessly, scattered in fear. Sheathing his sword, Blade's eyes turned upwards. The anomalous rifts in the sky began to form, a harbinger of the chaos that was to unfold. New gang, old foes, and now this. Never a dull night in New York, he muttered to himself. Outside, the sky looked wrong. Instead of the steady crawl of clouds or the glint of stars, rifts began to crack open, glowing in eerie purple and giving off a magnetic hum. From them, shadowy figures descended, some recognizable, and others strange and alien. Moments earlier, across the Atlantic, in the heart of Budapest, Selene, the death dealer of the vampires, was leaping across rooftop under a moon hanging like a silver medallion in the clear night sky, her signature corset and leather ensemble blending seamlessly with the night, a kind of night that stirred restlessness in the hearts of the supernatural. Selene was a silhouette against the luminescent backdrop of the moon. Her leather-clad figure moved effortlessly across the ancient rooftops, her eyes ever vigilant, searching for the elusive prey. The distinct scent of lichen was in the air, and she knew she was close. The growl reached her ears a split second before the first werewolf lunged from a hidden alcove. Its muscular body was a blur, but Selene was quicker. She sidestepped and delivered a vicious kick, sending it sprawling across the roof tiles. However, she had no time to catch her breath. A second lichen, larger and more ferocious, was already charging at her. Selene drew her twin Beretta handguns, silver bullets ready. She fired a succession of shots at the second werewolf, each one finding its mark. The beast staggered, but didn't go down. Instead, it let out a defiant roar, its yellow eyes locked onto hers. She turned her attention back to the first lichen, now back on its feet. Dodging its swipes, she engaged it in a brutal hand-to-hand combat, using her superior agility to evade its razor-sharp claws. But every move she made was countered by the second lichen. Cornered between the two, Selene leaped into the air, flipping gracefully and landing behind the larger beast. Drawing a silver dagger from her boot, she plunged it deep into its back. The werewolf cried out in pain, arching its back and inadvertently throwing Selene off. She rolled, narrowly avoiding the snapping jaws of the first lichen. Pulling out a small grenade, she lobbed it at the two, diving for cover as a bright explosion lit up the night, filling the air with the stench of burning fur. Silence reigned once more as the smoke cleared. The two lichens lay defeated, their once threatening forms now motionless. Selene took a moment, catching her breath, her face a portrait of grim determination. Her blue eyes scanned the horizon as she felt a disturbance. something pulling at the very fabric of her being. The Danube River reflected the sky, showing her the same rifts that tore the heavens apart in New York. As she descended to investigate, a gust of wind carried a whisper, a name she had only heard in the most ancient of vampire tales. Dracula. Back in New York, Blade had already engaged in combat with the beasts that seemed to have descended from the heavens. These weren't his typical vampire adversaries. Some bore mechanical augmentations, glowing eyes, and steel claws. As he staked one through the heart, he noticed it didn't turn to ash like they usually did, but sparked and glitched like a malfunctioning machine. Suddenly, his earpiece crackled to life. Blade, it's Whistler. I'm seeing reports from all over. It's not just us. The entire world is being swarmed by these things. And there's a name that keeps coming up, Dracula. Blade, while dodging an attack, replied, I thought he was a myth. Whistler's voice was gruff with concern. Looks like the myth is looking to become a legend. We need a plan. Across the pond, Selene had her hands full, fending off a swarm of cyber-lichens. Their roars were a mixture of beastly growls and the whirring of machines. As she dispatched one with her dual Berettas, David landed beside her, his usually composed face etched with worry. Selene, these creatures are like nothing we faced before. It's as if our world is blending with another. Selene, while reloading, responded, Then we adapt and survive. It's what we've always done. I'll see what I can find out, David glided off. As both cities were engulfed in chaos, an enormous hologram appeared in the skies. It was Dracula, but not as the legends described. His eyes glowed with an artificial light, and his skin had cybernetic grafts. In a voice that echoed across dimensions, he announced, Worlds of the past, present, and future, bow to your new ruler. I am Dracula, reborn for the age of the machine. Your resistance is not only pathetic, but futile. The statement ended, and silence, albeit momentarily, took over. It was clear a new era had begun. An era where two legendary hunters, Blade and Selene, would cross paths and destinies in a world torn asunder by a new breed of unnatural evil. Chapter 2. Converging Reality. The city was Blade's hunting ground, a sprawling urban jungle teeming with creatures of the night. Yet tonight, it felt different, off balance. An unsettling fog blanketed New York as Blade fought off relentless creatures, and the alleys whispered with unfamiliar sounds. As Blade rounded a corner, a shadowy figure bounded off a wall, its form unlike any vampire he'd encountered. Part lycanthrope, part machine, its cybernetic limbs glinted in the dim light. Drawing his sword, Blade braced himself. Two more of these hybrid beasts stepped out of the shadows, their eyes glowing an unnatural shade of blue. They moved with a terrifying fluidity, combining the predatory grace of a werewolf with the precision of machinery. Didn't peg you as the welcoming committee, Blade quipped, spinning his sword expertly. As the first hybrid lunged, Blade's sword met metal, sending sparks flying. Yet it wasn't just their armored hide that made these enemies formidable. With mechanical speed, another creature swept Blade's feet out from under him. He quickly recovered, unsheathing a silver stake and plunging it into the creature's chest. The beast let out a mechanical groan before collapsing. Across the ocean, Budapest's Gothic spires reached out to the clouds. Selene, perched on a building, scanned the labyrinthine streets below. A pair of figures moved with alarming speed, their movements suggesting not the usual werewolves or vampires she hunted, but something more, technological. Jumping down gracefully, Selene gave chase. Drawing her guns, she shot at one of the android, like vampires. It spun, revealing a metallic face with a sneer that was all too human. New model, Selene mused, dodging a swipe from the other creature. She used the momentum to drive her heel into its knee joint, hearing the satisfying crunch of metal. As it fell, she delivered 2 silver bullets to its partner, causing it to malfunction and jerk before it, too, went down. Back in New York, Blade was finishing off the last of the hybrids on the street. "Never thought I'd miss the regular bloodsuckers," he muttered, wiping his blade clean. Suddenly, his earpiece crackled to life. "Blade," Whistler's voice came through, strained. "Whatever's going on, it's bigger than just some new vampire tech. Reports are coming in worldwide. These rifts, they're everywhere, and no one I reached out to knows what's going on." "Well," Blade responded, "that definitely doesn't sound good." Selene, recovering her weapons, received a similar call. David's voice, tinged with urgency, informed her of the strange occurrences happening globally. "Selene, we need to regroup. Whatever this is, it's not just happening here." As the night wore on, both warriors felt the weight of a changed world pressing down on them. The boundaries of their realities were merging, introducing threats neither had faced before. The battle lines were being redrawn, and they'd have to adapt or perish. Chapter 3: Awakening. Skies that once glittered with stars now shimmered with unfamiliar constellations. Rifts, acting like cosmic wounds, pulsed and bled, merging worlds. Cityscapes were painted with neon lights and medieval towers side by side. Time and space were intertwined in a chaotic dance. Blade watched from a New York rooftop as a massive, futuristic airship pierced through a rift, its hull etched with arcane symbols. It hung ominously over the city. A broadcast resonated through every electronic device, overriding all signals. People of this dimension, a voice, cold and mechanical yet undeniably powerful, boomed, "I am Dracula, Lord of Vampires, but not the one you know. I hail from a future where I reign supreme, a merger of ancient magic and superior technology. Your world as you know it is now under my dominion." Images flashed across screens. Scenes of devastation, governments crumbling, world leaders turning to ash in mere seconds at Dracula's command, vampires and lichens from various timelines wreaking havoc. In Budapest, Selene witnessed the same proclamation, her azure eyes reflecting the chaotic fires below. She remembered tales of Dracula from centuries past, the legendary vampire from whom all bloodlines traced their origins. But this was a Dracula evolved, more formidable and terrifying than any legend. Blade's thoughts went back to his confrontations with Deacon Frost and Nomak. Even though they were powerful adversaries, this Dracula seemed to be on another level entirely. His grasp over technology made him a force beyond reckoning. To those thinking of resistance, Dracula's voice continued, dripping with malevolence. "Know this. Your legends, your heroes have already fallen to me. Blade, Selene, I know of you. Your futile efforts to resist will only bring you anguish." The audacity of the claim sent a chill down Selene's spine. Memories of Michael, her hybrid lover, and Lucian, the Lycan leader, filled her thoughts. She had lost so much already, and now this new threat dared to challenge everything she held dear. Back in New York, Blade was already in motion. He sped through the city streets on his motorbike, taking in the altered landscape. Whistler's voice crackled in his earpiece. "Blade, you've got your work cut out for you. This guy is on another level. But remember, he's still a vampire. There's got to be a way to take him down." "I'm open to suggestions," Blade replied dryly. navigating through the chaos. "Meet me at the safe house," Whistler said. "We need to regroup and plan our next move." In Budapest, Selene leaped between rooftops, determined to regroup with her own allies. Davis' voice echoed in her communicator. "Selene, we're gathering everyone at the Eastern Stronghold. We need to understand what we're dealing with." Chapter 4. Reluctant Alliances. The landscape was unrecognizable. The forests and cities that Selene had once known were now ravaged and corrupted. Buildings lay in ruins, trees were stripped bare, and the air was thick with the acrid scent of smoke and blood. Selene moved swiftly and silently, utilizing every ounce of her vampiric stealth. She wore a dark cloak that blended seamlessly with the night, its hood covering her distinctive features. Each step was deliberate, every breath measured. She was a shadow amongst shadows. She had heard whispers of the Eastern Stronghold still standing strong against the onslaught, and she hoped to find refuge there, if only for a short time. But the journey was perilous. The roads were crawling with cybernetic lichens, and their metallic growls echoed ominously in the distance. Cybernetic vampires patrolled the skies, their laser-focused eyes scanning the grounds below for any sign of resistance. Using the ancient vampiric technique of shadow melding, Selene became one with the darkness around her, allowing her to slip by unnoticed. She darted from one hiding spot to another, a ruined building, a dense thicket, an abandoned vehicle. Each time she felt the gaze of an enemy close by, she would close her eyes, drawing upon her deep reserves of power to become invisible to their sensors. On one occasion, she found herself cornered. A squad of cybernetic lichens had picked up her scent and were closing in. She climbed a dilapidated building, scaling its walls with ease, and positioned herself above the entrance. As the first lichen entered, she descended like a wraith, her twin daggers finding their mark. Before the others could react, she had vanished, leaving only the cold wind as a reminder of her presence. Despite her skills, the sheer number of enemies and the vast distance to the Eastern Stronghold weighed on her. She would often find brief moments of respite atop trees or hidden within the ruins, catching fleeting dreams of a time before the chaos. In one of these moments, she remembered Michael, their shared battles, and their love. A tear formed in her eye, but she wiped it away swiftly. This was not the time for emotions. She had a mission. After what felt like an eternity, the towering silhouette of the Eastern Stronghold appeared on the horizon, but as she neared it, a sinking feeling began to form in her gut. The once vibrant aura of the stronghold was dimmed, its protective barriers weakened. With renewed determination, Selene pressed on, prepared to face whatever awaited her within its walls. Rain poured over the Eastern Stronghold, a fortress that had stood for centuries as a beacon of vampire power and tradition. The stormy night concealed much of the stronghold's exterior damage, but the eerie silence was a clear indication that something had gone horribly wrong. Selene approached cautiously, her keen senses on high alert. The entrance, which was once heavily guarded by death dealers, lay open, allowing the wind and rain to rush in, merging with the scent of blood and decay. As she entered, her blue eyes glowing in the dim light, she witnessed a scene of unparalleled destruction. The opulent halls, filled with ancient tapestries and armor, were torn apart. Bodies of vampires, including many she recognized, lay strewn across the floor. Among them, David's lifeless form caught her attention, his once fierce eyes now vacant. Selene felt a pang in her heart. She had lost so many, but the death of David, someone she had grown to trust, was a wound that cut deep. In the shadows, She could make out the lumbering forms of cybernetic lichens, their mechanical parts whirring softly, and the whispering hiss of cybernetic vampires in the corners of the rooms. They had taken over the stronghold, but what unnerved her more was the sense of order and purpose they displayed. This was no random attack. It was a coordinated effort led by a powerful force. Selene hid behind one of the fallen pillars, listening intently. The cybernetic creatures seemed to be in a dormant state, as if waiting for further orders. She knew she couldn't take them all on, especially not in her current emotional state. Suddenly, a cascade of whispers filled her mind. The cries of the dying vampire elders echoed in her consciousness, their final thoughts reaching out to her. Their voices were weak, filled with despair. But amongst them, one voice stood out, stronger and more insistent than the others. "Selene," it whispered, "the stronghold has fallen. All our hopes rest on you now. Go to the New World, to New York. Seek the Daywalker. He remains when all other hunters have perished. Together, you may stand a chance." As the voices faded, replaced by the sound of the pouring rain and the distant thunder, Selene took one last look at the devastation. With a heavy heart, she left the stronghold, vowing to herself that their deaths would not be in vain. She was heading to New York, in search of the fabled Daywalker, her last hope in this new world of chaos. New York. A once vibrant and bustling city had transformed into a battlefield of darkness and light. Decimated buildings and crushed vehicles littered the streets. Sounds of roaring engines and echoing gunshots provided the background score to this apocalypse. Blade zoomed through the narrow lanes on his motorcycle, using the urban maze to his advantage against his pursuers. An unholy mix of lichens enhanced with cybernetics. He was clearly outmatched in terms of numbers, but his agility and combat experience were keeping him in the fight. A dark silhouette descended from the rooftops, landing gracefully amidst the horde. It was Selene, her twin Berettas blazing with silver bullets, taking down one beast after another. With this sudden intervention, the tide of the battle shifted, and the two legendary hunters began to take control. However, even as the last of the cyber lichens was defeated, both Blade and Selene aimed their weapons at each other. Years of experience had taught them to be wary, especially when dealing with the unknown. "You're not one of his," Blade stated, his sunglasses hiding his eyes, but not the suspicion in his voice. Selene, her eyes glowing a fierce blue, replied tersely, "And neither are you." "They call you Daywalker?" Blade grunted in affirmation. As the two assessed each other, a shared memory flashed in both their minds. The names Deacon Frost and Lucian, both had been formidable enemies, but they had been defeated in their respective timelines. Recognizing the names, Blade said, "Frost was a pain in my ass, thinking he could control vampire evolution. And Lucian," Selene added, "sought to bridge the gap between lichens and vampires. But I never imagined something like this," she gestured towards the lifeless cyber. "Lichens, a fusion of machine and monster." A sudden explosion nearby broke their tense standoff. Both knew that their combined strength would be necessary to fend off the continuous threats that the rifts brought. "Truce, for now," Blade proposed, holstering his weapon. Selene nodded. "We have to find a way to close those rifts and get rid of that monstrosity, calling himself Dracula." The two began to move together, their steps synchronized as if they'd been allies for years. Blade shared his knowledge of the vampire houses in New York and the technology Whistler had developed. Selene, in turn, spoke of the ancient vampire covens of Europe and the Death Dealers, an elite group of vampire warriors. As they exchanged stories, techniques, and even a few laughs about their respective worlds, it became evident that they were not so different after all. Both had dedicated their lives to a singular cause, and both had suffered immense personal loss. In this world, on the brink of collapse, the beginnings of a powerful alliance were forged. But the challenges ahead were immense, and only time would tell if this partnership would be enough to turn the tide against the darkness. Chapter 5. Legacy of Blood. In another time and space, a bustling cityscape, a metropolis echoing signs of prosperity and technological advancements. Flying cars dominate the sky. The streets are illuminated with neon lights, and holographic billboards display various adverts. But as futuristic as it appears, there's an unmistakable Gothic undertone to the architecture, hinting at the city's ancient origins. In a grand castle that looms over this advanced city, on a decadent throne, a younger Dracula sits, still untouched by technology. His pale, almost translucent skin is a sharp contrast to the glimmering metal and pulsating circuits of the world outside. A council of vampires, including some from Dracula's most trusted kin, are in heated debate. They're concerned about humanity's rapid advancements, their growing reliance on technology, and the potential threat they pose to vampire supremacy. "We've ruled from the shadows for centuries," one elder argues. "But now they harness the sun, emulate our strengths, and even replicate our immortality with their machines." Dracula, leaning on his throne, listens intently. Despite the concerns, he seems more curious than threatened. "The winds of change cannot be halted," he muses. "Instead, we must adapt and rise with them." With that, he introduces a figure standing in the shadows. A human scientist with a scar running down his cheek, showcasing a blend of flesh and machine. The scientist steps forward, unveiling a device that melds ancient vampire magic with cutting-edge technology. "I call it the Nexus," the scientist announces. "A bridge between our world's magic and its future. With this, we can harness the power of technology, blending it with our essence." As the council debates the implications, Dracula decides to be the first to test the Nexus. The machine whirs to life, embedding itself into Dracula's being. The room is filled with blinding light and deafening noise. When the dust settles, the transformation is complete. Dracula, once the epitome of ancient vampiric might, now stands as a hybrid, part vampire, part machine, and entirely formidable and unprecedented. The council members are torn. Some view this transformation as heresy, a defilement of their sacred bloodline. Others see it as evolution, a necessary step to maintain dominance in a changing world to avoid extinction. In the days that follow, Dracula's power grows exponentially. With the Nexus integrated into his being, he can command both magic and machine. Those who oppose him are swiftly and ruthlessly dealt with. Those who pledge allegiance are given the gift of the Nexus, transforming into cyber vampires under Dracula's rule. And thus begins Dracula's new technological rise to power, crushing rebellions, conquering territories, and forging alliances with other supernatural beings, including Lycans who are also upgraded with cyber enhancements. Back in the present day, Blade and Selene, hiding in a dilapidated building, watch this history via images from circuitry of a fallen cybernetic vampire. Selene holds one hand to the remnants of the brain and presses the other to Blade's head, transmitting the visuals of this history of the Nexus. As the visuals fade, the weight of what they're up against becomes clear. "That's intense," Blade murmurs, adjusting his shades. Selene nods, her blue eyes reflecting determination. "It's more than just touch and teeth we're fighting. It's eons of ambition, boundless power, and a legacy of blood, Blade smirks, flipping his sword. Then let's write a new legacy. The two of them wait until several patrols of cybernetic Lycans rush by the warehouse before setting off deeper into the heart of the cybernetic vampire realm. The moonlight dapples the secluded warehouse, Blade and Whistler's safe house. Blade and Selene cautiously approach, noting the eerie silence. Blade whispers, "Something's not right." Pushing the door open, they're greeted with a horrific scene. The once secure safe house is in chaos. The walls are marked with claw scratches and blood splatters, overturned tables, scattered weapons, and the telltale glint of cybernetics hint at a fierce struggle. Without warning, Lycans, their fur embedded with glowing circuits, pounce from the shadows. Simultaneously, cyber vampires with wings augmented by metal alloys swoop down from the rafters. Blade, with his razor-sharp reflexes, draws his sword, deflecting the first attacker and then slicing through another. Selene, with a fluid motion, unsheathes her dual guns and fires at the airborne adversaries, bringing them crashing down. The room becomes a whirlwind of action. Each flash of Blade's blade sends sparks flying as it clashes with the cybernetic enhancements of his foes. Selene's acrobatics, paired with her precise aim, ensure that not a single bullet is wasted. However, as they clear the room, Blade's heart sinks. At the far corner, he finds Whistler, severely injured and pinned beneath a piece of debris. Rushing to his side, Blade cradles his mentor. Whistler, his breath ragged, manages a weak smile. "Should have known you'd dance your way through hell." Blade's voice breaks. "Hang on, old man. We'll get you out." Whistler coughs, blood staining his lips. "Listen to me, kid." He reaches into his pocket, pulling out a cracked device. Before all communications went down, got word of an armory these fucks transported from whatever dimension they came from. Places filled with weapons might be strong enough to stop this tech. Infuse Dracula. Selene, joining them, kneels beside Whistler. "We'll find it, I promise." Whistler grasps Blade's hand, squeezing it tightly. "You've always been like a son to me. Remember what we fight for. Not just against the monsters out there, but the ones inside us." Blade fights back tears. "I won't forget. I promise." Whistler's eyes glaze over as he whispers his last words. "Give 'em hell for me." Blade nods, closing Whistler's eyes gently. "You can count on it." As the echoes of their fierce fight fade away, Selene looks around the ruined safe house. She finds Blade kneeling beside a wall filled with weapons, many now broken or missing. "Whistler was more than just a mentor to you," Selene begins, her voice soft, acknowledging the pain in Blade's eyes. Blade nods, picking up a shattered silver stake. "He was family, taught me everything I know, not just about hunting, but about humanity. In this world where lines blur so easily, he kept me grounded." Selene recalls her own history, the bonds she's formed and lost. We all need anchors, people who remind us of who we are and why we fight. Blade stands, holding up a specially designed blade. Whistler made this. UV edge, coated with garlic extract, deadly to any vampire, cyber or not. Selene smirks, pulling out her modified Beretta handguns. "Impressive. My bullets are filled with liquid silver and ultraviolet light. For any Lycan or vampire that comes my way." The two hunters move through the wreckage, comparing and sharing their weapons. Blade demonstrates his glaive, a sharp, circular weapon, great for close combat. It's a boomerang and blade in one. Selene, in turn, shows her shurikens upgraded with explosive tips. Distance and surprise, my go to strategy. Blade chuckles, you're full of surprises. As they discuss tactics, it's evident the respect they have for each other's skills. Blade elaborates on the importance of decapitation for vampires, while Selene shares the critical spots to shoot a lichen for instant termination. But these cybernetic creatures, Selene says, concern evident. They're a new challenge. Their anatomy is unpredictable, a combination of flesh and machine. Blade nods, looking at a crushed cyber vampire head with circuits still flickering. We need to adapt, aim for their power sources, disable their tech while targeting their supernatural weaknesses. Traditional firepower might actually work to disable their circuitry. Blade tosses Selene a few fragmentation grenades from a crate as he pockets some for himself. Selene nods, impressed. It's a dual strategy. But if we can find a way to combine our strengths, weapons, and knowledge, we might just stand a chance. Blade smirks with you by my side. I like those odds. Now let's check out this armory from another dimension. The two warriors, having established a mutual respect and camaraderie, gather their weapons and head out, ready for the battles ahead. Chapter 6. Weapons of the Damned. By all accounts, it should have been sunrise, but it wasn't. The tiers through the sky somehow maintained a perpetual night where the moon seemed to be suspended, casting long shadows over a sprawling complex with towering spires, shimmering barriers, and patrolling cyber vampires. A massive emblem bearing Dracula's sigil hangs over the main entrance of what appears to be an armory. From a distance, Blade and Selene assess the structure. Blade flips open a compact device displaying a holographic blueprint. This might be where Dracula stores the weapons fused with that Nexus tech. Our best shot is right here. He points at a vault symbol. Selene, reloading her guns with silver bullets, nods. We need an edge, something that can counter his newfound abilities. As they inch closer, using the darkness as cover, they spot two familiar faces guarding the main entrance, Whistler and David. But these aren't the allies they remember. Their eyes glow with a mechanical hue, and their bodies showcase a blend of organic and machine. Blade, gritting his teeth, whispers, Whistler. The pain of seeing his old mentor, now a puppet for Dracula, is palpable. Selene, recognizing David, murmurs, he was like a brother to me. Dracula will pay for this. Blade tries to push back an overwhelming feeling of dread. I'm getting a real bad feeling about this. It's like Dracula is messing with our heads. Selene nods. As they contemplate a plan of approach, Whistler's cybernetic eyes detect an anomaly. We've got company, he rasps, activating his weapon. A retractable blade infused with glowing energy. David, with his enhanced senses, picks up on their scent. It's Selene, he declares, drawing twin laser-infused crossbows. The ensuing battle is fierce. Blade faces off against Whistler in a whirlwind of steel and sparks. Each strike showcases their deep bond, making the battle not just physical, but deeply emotional. Selene and David's fight is a dance of agility and technique. At one point, David pins Selene against a pillar, whispering, "I'm sorry," before their weapons clash again. Whistler throws Blade, landing on top of him, attempting to drive his glowing weapon through Blade's throat. "Selene, now!" Blade yells, as he pulls a grenade from his belt, shifts both legs into his own chest before pushing his feet into Whistler's, sending him flying backwards into the wall. Selene flips out of David's swiping grasp, also retrieving a grenade, and nods at Blade. They both throw the grenades at the same time, the explosions frying the circuits of their once comrades. They walk over, watching sparks and convulsions. "It's not really them," Blade says. "Isn't it?" Selene counters. Without another word, they enter the armory. The vast armory lay bathed in dim, eerie light. Huge glass cabinets, each displaying countless weapons of various designs, reflected their glimmers. Blade's eyes focused on one particular weapon, a silver-bladed katana with inscriptions eerily similar to the tattoos that laced his arms. As he approached it, his fingers trembling, he reached out and touched its hilt. Suddenly, a rush of memories flooded him, not his own, but those of his mother, and the night she was taken by Deacon Frost. He saw Frost's cruel smile, felt the cold touch of vampire teeth, and heard his mother's final scream. But among these memories, there was also a whisper, a hint of Frost's ambition to harness the blood god's power. That ambition had been Frost's downfall. Selene, her eyes drawn to a pair of modified Beretta handguns, felt the weight of centuries as she touched them. Images of Michael, the hybrid, raced through her mind. His transformation, their love, their battles, all played out in an instant. Lucian's voice echoed, reminding her of the Lycan's pursuit of freedom from the vampire's oppressive rule, Victor's treachery, Sanja's forbidden love, and the betrayal that started the age. Then, a new memory, unfamiliar but tied intrinsically to the current chaos, the first Dracula. The memory revealed his initial attempt to harness interdimensional power but failed, leading to his dormant years. This new cybernetic Dracula had learned from the first's mistakes and had become more powerful than Selene could have imagined. Reeling from the emotional onslaught, Blade and Selene caught each other's eyes. Their experiences were different, yet the theme was eerily similar: ambition, betrayal, and the quest for power. "These weapons," Selene whispered, "they're not just tools. They hold memories, histories." Blade nodded, understanding her implication. "We can use these memories against him. Every enemy has a weakness. Frost had his god, Complex, and the original Dracula had his ambitions." Selene pondered. If this Dracula has merged both technology and magic, then he's also merged their vulnerabilities. We need to exploit them. Unfortunately, this all feels like he's exploiting us. "This seems to be all mind games," Blade mused, perplexed. "But why?" Selene asked. "Why not just try to kill us?" Blade thought for a moment before answering. "Maybe he needs us for something. We're not regular vampires. Maybe even with all this cyber shit, he's still missing a piece." Behind them, the sound of a door sliding open made them turn. It was David, his eyes glowing an unnatural shade of blue, indicating he was under Dracula's control. "Blade, Selene," he called out, in a voice dripping with malice. "You may have unlocked the past, but the future belongs to Dracula." Blade stepped forward, brandishing his newfound katana. "Your Dracula's made a lot of enemies in the past, David. It's time to remind him of them." Another cybernetic whistler, as well as dozens of enhanced vampires and Lycans, emerged behind David, trapping Blade and Selene in the armory. There is no escape. As David took a threatening step forward, the large, ornate windows of the armory shattered in a cascade of flying glass. Silhouetted against the moonlit sky, familiar figures descended into the room on zip lines. With a cocky grin, Hannibal King swung down, landing perfectly on his feet. He pulled out his dual handguns and aimed them at David. Did someone order the cavalry? Because the king is here. Behind him, Abby Whistler, her crossbow in hand, landed gracefully. Fashionably late, but we make up for it in style, she quipped. Even the normally stoic Frank Drake couldn't help but smirk as he unfolded his specialized Drake sword. Looks like we've got some cleaning up to do, he remarked. The room was electric with anticipation. Selene, although initially startled by the sudden appearance of Blade's allies, couldn't help but crack a smile. Their odds had just improved significantly. Blade, suppressing a smirk, turned to David. Like I said, Dracula's made a lot of enemies. David, glancing around at the newly assembled team, hissed, "This changes nothing. Dracula's power is beyond anything you can imagine." Hannibal chuckled. "You might be right, but we're pretty imaginative ourselves." The spacious interior of the armory bristled with tension. Cybernetic David, with his synthetic limbs that shimmered in a cold, metallic blue under the dim lights, squared off against Hannibal King, his handguns raised in a threatening stance. Not far from David, the hulking figure of a cybernetically enhanced Whistler glared at Blade, his former protege. Both cybernetic beings pulsed with an eerie blue light, hinting at the technological power that surged within them. Dozens of vampires and lycans seethed behind them, ready to pounce. Hannibal smirked, twirling his guns. "You guys might have a few upgrades, but you're still the same predictable undead scum." Cybernetic David lunged with inhuman speed, his arm transforming into a razor-sharp blade. Hannibal dodged, firing off 2 shots in rapid succession, but the bullets merely ricocheted off David's armored hide. Abby, always the sharpshooter, released a bolt from her crossbow, targeting the joints in David's cybernetic limbs. The bolt hit its mark, causing sparks to fly, but David hardly faltered. Frank Drake, utilizing his ancestral knowledge of vampiric foes, swung his Drake sword with finesse, aiming to keep David at bay. The sword clashed against David's blade, arm producing a shower of sparks. The force of their blows reverberated through the armory. On the other side, Blade and Whistler's face-off was more personal. Whistler, with his augmented strength, threw powerful punches that Blade narrowly evaded. "Whistler, fight this," Blade shouted, parrying a blow with his titanium-infused sword. Whistler's voice was distorted, layered with mechanical undertone. "I am beyond your reach now, Blade." Selene, drawing from her extensive combat experience against lycans and vampires alike, moved like a shadow, looking for vulnerabilities in the cybernetic foes. She quickly found herself back with Abby, firing bullets and bolts, covering each other's blind spots. Blade, employing his unique hybrid strength, landed a powerful kick on Whistler, sending him crashing into a rack of weapons. Whistler retaliated by activating hidden thrusters in his back, propelling forward like a missile and tackling Blade to the ground. Hannibal, seizing the opportunity, tossed a UV grenade towards the dueling pair. The room was momentarily bathed in an intense ultraviolet light. Whistler roared in pain, his vampiric flesh searing from the UV exposure, but his cybernetics countered by producing a protective shield around him. Seeing the momentary advantage, Frank leaped onto David, pinning him down with the weight of his body and the sharp end of his sword. David strained, his eyes glowing with a cybernetic rage, but Frank pressed the blade deeper. Blade managed to push Whistler off, rising to his feet. "We don't want to kill you," he said, his voice filled with pain. "We want to save you." Whistler's cybernetic laugh was hollow. "It's too late for that." As the battle raged on, Selene noticed a control panel on the far side of the room. Realizing a power surge might fry some circuits and this panel might have quite a bit voltage, she signaled to Abby. Both women made their way, fighting off any vampire drones that tried to intercept them. As they reached the panel, Abby worked quickly, cross-referencing her knowledge with the future tech. "I think I can disrupt their cybernetic enhancements," she shouted over the din. With a final push of a button, a surge of electricity emanated from the panel, enveloping the countless foes now surging through the broken windows in addition to the doorway. They convulsed, their systems short-circuiting. Blade, Hannibal, and Frank retreated, watching cautiously. When the electricity subsided, David and Whistler lay motionless on the ground. Their cybernetic parts flickered, struggling to reboot. Blade knelt beside Whistler, sorrow evident in his eyes. He had saved his friend from Dracula's control, but at what cost? Everyone with UV grenades now withdrew them. "Now!" Blade yelled. Everyone tossed them in every direction, the room exploding with radiation. When the blinding lights subsided, none of their adversaries remained. The dust settled in the armory as Blade's allies gathered, taking in the aftermath of the chaotic battle. "Thought you all were dead," Blade remarked, sheathing his sword. Hannibal shrugged, reloading his guns. "You know me, always up for a surprise visit." Frank nudged Hannibal with his elbow. "You just can't resist a good entrance, can you?" Abby adjusted the string on her crossbow, looking around the room. We were hunting deep in the city's tunnels. The last thing we expected was this. She gestured to the sprawling armory and the deactivated cybernetic foes. Blade raised an eyebrow. "Didn't hear about the rifts?" Frank shook his head. "It was silent down there. We just thought an EMP went off. Our comms went dark. When vampires and lichens start fusing with tech, you know the world's taken a weird turn." Hannibal laughed. "Honestly, I was just annoyed my Spotify playlist stopped working. Had the perfect track for a vampire hunt." Abby's gaze flitted across the room, a look of concern apparent. "Where's Dad?" she asked, her voice barely more than a whisper. Blade hesitated for a moment, taking a deep breath before replying, "He didn't make it." Abby looked over at the fried corpse of Whistler. "That's not him. These freaks are coming from other dimensions." Abby nodded somberly, although still confused. A heavy silence descended on the group. Frank placed a reassuring hand on Abby's shoulder, and she nodded, wiping away a tear. Hannibal, always the one to break a somber mood, cleared his throat. "So this techno, Dracula, think he has Wi-Fi in his lair, asking for a friend?" As they all stepped out into the ruined city, an otherworldly tower emerged, many times taller than any other building. Blade smirked. "Let's find out." Chapter 7. Siege of Shadows. The silhouette of Dracula's tower loomed ominously in the distance, cutting through the swirling dark clouds like a monolithic blade. Cybernetic patrols flew around its perimeter, their glinting bodies shining in the dim light. Blade, Selene, Hannibal, Abby, and Drake crept up to a vantage point, eyeing the imposing structure. "We've got to find a way in," Blade whispered, looking through his binoculars. Before Selene could reply, a horde of cyber-lichens and cyber-vampires ambushed them from behind, catching them off guard. The group quickly spread out, each member taking on multiple enemies. Drake, with his ancient vampiric power, unleashed a blast of energy, disintegrating a few cyber-lichens. "Remember me," he grinned, alluding to their shared past. Abby pulled out her crossbow, firing arrows with expert precision, each one finding its mark in the heart of a cyber vampire. "Who's next?" she challenged. Hannibal ducked, narrowly avoiding a cyber. Lycan swing, then countered with a swift kick, knocking it off balance. "Man, I missed this," he quipped. Blade and Selene worked together seamlessly, with swift and calculated. Blade's submachine gun in one hand, laying waste to foe after foe and sword in the other, slicing the seemingly never-ending onslaught of creatures of the night, while Selene's dual Berettas fired bullet after bullet, piercing the heads of cyber vampires and cyber Lycans alike. In the midst of the battle, a cyber Lycan lunged at Selene, but she dodged and threw it towards the magnetic field surrounding the tower. To everyone's surprise, the Lycan went through. Selene's eyes widened. "That's our way in," she shouted, grabbing a cyber vampire and diving through the barrier with it. Blade followed suit, using a cyber Lycan as a shield, with Hannibal, Abby, and Drake doing the same. Inside the tower, the team quickly regrouped, but their respite was short-lived. Inside Dracula's tower, a cold blue hue enveloped the vast hall, revealing disturbingly familiar silhouettes. The group now faced eerily accurate cybernetic versions of themselves, each replica pulsing with an intimidating artificial glow. Blade faced off against Cyberblade, their likeness uncanny. Blade smirked. "Couldn't improve on perfection, could you?" Cyber Blade's voice was metallic, yet chillingly reminiscent of the original. Perfection. Let's test that theory. The two engaged, their swords clashing and echoing throughout the chamber. As their duel continued, Blade deftly deflected a particularly forceful blow, quipping, "Didn't anyone ever tell you copying's the highest form of flattery? Feeling flattered yet?" Cyber Blade, unperturbed, retorted, "Just outdated." Selene and her cyber counterpart circled each other warily. "You think replicating me with a few extra circuits will do the trick?" Selene taunted. Cyber Selene coolly responded, "Not a replication, an upgrade." With that, she lunged, engaging Selene in a flurry of high-flying kicks and gunshots. Selene, narrowly avoiding a bullet, retorted, "You might have new hardware, but you've still got bugs." Drake's confrontation was more monstrous, facing a cyber version that had even more exaggerated vampiric features. "Ah, nostalgia. I've battled many versions of myself," Drake mused. "Cyber?" Drake growled, "Yet none like me." Drake chuckled. "True, you do have a certain circuit board charm." Hannibal and his cyber self squared up, the atmosphere tense, yet with a hint of comedic absurdity. "You know," Hannibal began, "seeing my face on you is giving me an identity crisis." "Cyber," Hannibal snapped, "get ready for an existential one," and lunged. The fight was a bizarre mix of Hannibal's wild moves and his counterpart's precise robotic mimicry. Dodging a swing, Hannibal retorted, "Man, you really are stiff. You need to lighten up." Lastly, Abby confronted her double, crossbow at the ready. "Guess I'm looking in a warped mirror, huh?" Cyber Abby, with a monotone voice, responded, "Mirrors reflect the past. I am the future." Abby smirked, "A future with no sense of humor. Hard pass." The battles were intense, each character using their wit, experience, and determination against the raw power and advanced techs of their cyber counterparts. The duel between Blade and Cyberblade was an extraordinary dance of martial arts mastery. The floor beneath them echoed with each precise movement, both anticipating each other's next move due to their mirrored knowledge of combat. Blade began with a flying sidekick, aiming for Cyberblade's head. The android deftly sidestepped, retaliating with a fast series of jabs. Blade parried each blow, taking advantage of his human agility, slipping under Cyberblade's outstretched arm and aiming a spinning hook kick at his opponent's temple. Cyber, Blade stumbled back, momentarily off balance. As Cyber Blade regained his footing, he shot forward with an explosive energy, catching Blade off guard with a powerful roundhouse. Blade was flung to the side, but managed to roll with the momentum, popping back onto his feet. Blade then switched gears, utilizing his training, mixing fluid movements with unpredictable strikes. He baited Cyberblade with a feint to the left, then rapidly closed the distance, striking the android's chest with a rapid succession of punches. Cyberblade staggered, but it was evident that hand-to-hand wasn't going to be enough to dismantle this technological monstrosity. In a lightning, quick move, Blade drew his signature glaive, spinning it expertly. The room's light glinted mincingly off the weapon's blades. Cyberblade, mirroring Blade's move, also revealed an identical glaive, only with an enhanced shimmer, revealing its cybernetic enhancements. The duel resumed with increased intensity. Blades clashed, singing a deadly tune as they parried, slashed, and sought their mark. However, Blade's experience soon began to show. He managed to corner Cyberblade, blocking a thrust and deflecting it upwards, leaving the android exposed. Blade feigned a frontal lunge, causing Cyberblade to raise his glaive in defense. But it was a ruse. Using his heightened agility, Blade rolled swiftly to the side, disappearing from Cyberblade's immediate line of sight. Before the android could react, Blade reappeared behind him, his glaive slashing horizontally in a fluid motion. With a swift and powerful thrust forward, Blade impaled Cyberblade from the back with his glaive just as he used his other hand to deliver a deadly dagger stab in the front. The two strikes, almost simultaneous, were perfectly executed. The room echoed with the sound of whirring machinery and electronic buzzing as Cyberblade's system short-circuited. Sparks flew from the wounds, and the glow in Cyberblade's eyes began to fade. With one final twitch, the cybernetic doppelganger collapsed, defeated. Blade, with his usual cool demeanor, remarked, "Guess tech can't replace the real thing," and with a flourish, retrieved his glaive. In another cold, metallic corridor of Dracula's tower, two mirrored forms stood facing each other. Selene, the iconic death dealer, and her cybernetic counterpart, Cyber Selene. Their dark leather ensembles appeared eerily identical, but where Selene's eyes held a fiery intensity, Cyber Selene's eyes emitted a chilling, unnatural blue glow. The standoff was tense. Neither took their eyes off the other, each assessing their mirror image. Then, in a sudden blur of movement, Cyber Selene lunged, producing a set of silver daggers that gleamed with a technological light. Selene evaded the initial swipe, drawing her twin Berettas. Bullets blazed, but Selene was fast, dodging and deflecting with her daggers. As Selene attempted to put distance between them, she was met with a flurry of throwing stars, hurled with precision by her cyber counterpart. Ducking and weaving, Selene narrowly avoided the sharp projectiles. She holstered one of her pistols, drawing a silver-edged sword in its place. The blade clashed with Selene's daggers in a dance of silver and blue. Sparks flew as metal met enhanced alloy. For a moment, their weapons locked, and the two were face to face. Selene snarled, "You may have my face, but you'll never have my spirit." Cyber Selene, with her synthetic voice, retorted, "Emotions are a weakness. I've been optimized beyond them." The two separated and circled one another. Selene had always relied on her instincts and adaptability in battle. The predictive algorithms of her adversary were extraordinary, but they couldn't anticipate true human unpredictability. With an acrobatic flip, Selene launched herself into the air, using the walls to ricochet and close the distance. Saber, Selene wasn't prepared for the aerial assault, attempting to track Selene's rapid movements. Capitalizing on the surprise, Selene landed behind Selene, locking her in a brief grapple. They tussled, exchanging blows, but Selene found her opening. With a swift movement, she angled her Beretta up and fired a single devastating shot under Selene's chin. The blue glow in the android's eyes flickered and dimmed. A trickle of synthetic fluid, eerily resembling blood, dripped from the fatal wound. Selene's form went limp and collapsed onto the cold floor of the tower. Catching her breath, Selene whispered with a hint of sadness, "Even in this form, you were still a part of me." She then readied herself, moving forward with renewed determination. The chamber in Dracula's tower was a maze of archaic and futuristic constructs, but Abby's focus was solely on her opponent. Across the room stood a reflection, her twin, though this version had cold steel where there should be warm flesh. Cyber. Abby's eyes gleamed with an uncanny light, devoid of emotion. "You can't seriously think you're an upgrade," Abby sneered, taking a combat stance. The cybernetic twin lunged without a word, blades extending from her forearms. Abby quickly unslung her crossbow, sending a barrage of bolts towards her advancing counterpart. Abby deftly dodged them, her movements calculated and precise, a blend of martial arts training and machine precision. The two collided, a flurry of punches, kicks, and blade swipes. Abby's movements were methodical, analyzing Abby's patterns and predicting her moves. During one of their exchanges, Bobby managed to knock Abby's crossbow away, leaving her seemingly unarmed. However, Abby was far from defenseless. In a quick, improvised move, she drew 2 arrows from her quiver, holding them like makeshift daggers. "What's the matter? Don't have one of these in your toolkit," Abby taunted, brandishing her arrow blades. Abby responded with a metallic smirk. "You think primitive tools can stop me?" The fight intensified. With her crossbow gone, Abby relied on her agility, trying to find gaps in Abby's defense. But the cybernetic twin was relentless, pushing Abby back with a combination of brute force and cold strategy. They engaged in a brutal dance. Arrow met blade in a clashing whirlwind, each trying to land a decisive blow. Abby was starting to wear down, the fatigue showing, while Abby seemed to have inexhaustible energy. In a desperate move, Abby managed to slide under one of Abby's sweeping kicks, getting in close. With a ferocious upward thrust, she jammed one arrow into the android's groin, causing her to falter in shock. "You definitely should use protection." Abby then swiftly followed with a piercing strike to the throat using the second arrow. Abby stumbled back, her internal system sparking and malfunctioning. Her synthetic voice emitted a distorted gurgle as the blue in her eyes faded to black. She crashed to the floor, lifeless. Abby, panting heavily and smeared with a mix of her own blood and Abby's artificial fluids, let out a deep breath. She retrieved her crossbow and slung it over her shoulder, her resolve unwavering as she rejoined the team in their quest to topple Dracula's reign. Frank Drake, last in the line of the legendary Van Helsing family and a master combatant, stepped into the ornate chamber, eyes widening in disbelief as he faced off against a mirror image, Drake. A gleaming, metallic version of himself, Drake was every bit as imposing, but with an added aura of cold, mechanical dread. "Guess tech support went overboard with the customer service," Frank quipped, sizing up his doppelganger. Cyber Drake responded, his voice a distorted digital echo of Frank's own. You're outdated, Drake. A relic of the past. Frank smirked, drawing his signature handguns. Old school has its charms. Let's dance. Both men leapt into action. Frank fired, but Drake deflected the bullets with rapid swipes of his enhanced katana, the blade shimmering with energy. Closing the gap, Cyber Drake swung hard, with Frank parrying using a dagger from his belt. They clashed relentlessly, moving with acrobatic grace and power. Frank's experience and improvisational skills were contrasted against Cyber Drake's analytical precision. Every bullet, blade swing, and punch was met with a calculated counter. You may have all my moves, Frank panted, but you lack my passion, my soul. That's what makes the difference. Emotions make you weak, Cyber, Drake retorted, launching a series of lightning, fast thrusts. The room echoed with the clang of metal on metal. Frank utilized every trick he knew, deploying smoke bombs and using the shadows to his advantage. Cyber Drake, however, seemed to predict each move, his sensors tracking Frank's movements through the smoke. In a daring maneuver, Frank hurled a specially designed stake towards his opponent. Cyber Drake, anticipating a straightforward attack, deflected it easily. But the stake exploded on contact, releasing a flash of blinding light. Momentarily disoriented, Cyber Drake didn't see Frank closing in. You always were too predictable, Frank teased, drawing upon his immense strength and family lineage. With a roar, Frank gripped the android's head and, using all his might, tore it from the metallic shoulders. Wires sparked, fluid sprayed, and the headless body of Cyber Drake slumped to the ground. Breathing heavily, Frank held up the severed head, a symbol of his victory. Like I said, old school, he remarked with a wink, dropping the head and preparing to join his comrades in their ongoing battle. The room was filled with the sharp, echoing retorts of gunfire as Hannibal King took aim, his bullets streaking towards his doppelganger, Cyber Hannibal. Yet, the cybernetic version of himself seemed to move with an uncanny, robotic grace, dodging bullets with split-second precision. Every shot was met with an equally fast and deadly return volley. Both versions of Hannibal were master marksmen, their skills unparalleled. The room became a deadly dance of flying lead and acrobatics. Come on, don't you ever run out of ammo, Hannibal shouted, diving behind an ornate pillar for cover, reloading his dual pistols. Just shut up and die, Cyber, Hannibal yelled back. Hannibal grunted, peeking out and firing off another volley. He then tossed a smoke bomb, obscuring the room in a thick haze. The advantage he hoped for, however, was short-lived. Infrared vision from Cyber, Hannibal easily penetrated the smoke, allowing him to track and target his human counterpart. As the smoke began to clear, the two combatants found themselves face to face. Their guns clicked empty simultaneously. Well, this is awkward, Hannibal remarked, smirking. Without a moment's hesitation, the two lunged at each other. The ensuing hand-to-hand combat was a symphony of punches, kicks, and grapples. Every move Hannibal made, Hannibal countered, and vice versa. In a swift motion, Hannibal managed to disarm Hannibal, knocking his pistol away. But the advantage was short-lived as Hannibal's arm morphed into a blade, slashing towards Hannibal's face. Ducking and dodging, Hannibal felt the pressure mounting. He needed an edge, a way to finish this once and for all. Remembering a weapon he kept for dire situations, Hannibal managed to grab a UV grenade from his belt. But how to use it? Seizing an opportunity, He feinted a punch, luring Hannibal into opening his mouth for a robotic roar. In that split second, Hannibal shoved the grenade down his throat, the pin already pulled. "What did you do, Hannibal croaked, his voice distorted with panic. Hannibal jumped back, grinning widely. Tums won't help with that indigestion. An intense UV light emanated from Hannibal's mouth and eyes, just before his midsection, exploded outward, sending shards of metal and circuits in every direction. The room fell silent, save for the distant battles echoing through the tower. Hannibal, panting, looked up to find Blade, Selene, Abby, and Frank joining him, their faces a mix of relief and amazement. "Are we all really our own worst enemy?" Hannibal quipped, gesturing to the smoldering remains of his cybernetic twin. The collective groan from the group echoed louder than any gunshot. Chapter 8. Labyrinth of Time. The insides of Dracula's tower twisted and turned, defying the laws of physics. With its cavernous chambers, gravity, defying walkways, and endless mazes, it was a surreal blend of Gothic architecture and futuristic design. Blade and Selene stepped cautiously, their senses heightened. But their companions, Hannibal King, Abby Whistler, and Frank Drake, were nowhere in sight. The entry point had dispersed them randomly throughout the structure. "Feels like we're walking in a damn Escher painting," Blade muttered, his eyes darting around scanning for traps. "Who?" Selene asked, momentarily distracted from their environment. "Never mind," Blade replied, a smirk playing on his lips. As they navigated through the bewildering maze, they were confronted by both mystic illusions and technological holograms. Familiar faces from their past emerged, whispering haunting phrases or crying out for help. Blade saw a shimmering figure of his mother, her voice echoing, "Eric, save me. Don't let him take me again." Selene, on the other hand, was met with the illusion of her daughter, Eve. "Mother, where were you when I needed you?" Each illusion was designed to distract, to weaken their resolve. But both Blade and Selene recognized these for what they were, mental tricks meant to break them. "We need to stay focused. These are just illusions," Selene whispered, her voice filled with determination, even as her eyes betrayed a hint of sorrow. Suddenly, a massive projection of Deacon Frost appeared, smirking. "Blade, did you really think you could escape your past? Or me?" Blade, gritting his teeth, lunged forward, his sword slicing through the hologram, which flickered and vanished, only to be replaced by a projection of Lucian, leader of the Lycans. "Selene," Lucian's image crooned, "did you ever wonder if you made the right choices?" Selene, her blue eyes glinting, responded, "Every choice led me to this moment, Lucian, and I regret nothing." With that, she fired a bullet, dispersing the image into a million shards of light. The duo continued, the environment shifting around them. But as they delved deeper, the illusion started blending with reality. Cyber, vampires, and werewolves, seemingly conjured from their darkest nightmares, lunged at them. The boundaries between memory and the present were blurring. In a grand hall, mirrors surrounded them. Each reflection showed different points in their lives. Blade saw himself as a newborn, then a young vampire hunter, and then his first confrontation with Deacon Frost. Selene's reflections showed her initial days as a death dealer, her love with Michael, and her confrontation with Marcus. A voice, chilling in its robotic modulation, echoed through the hall. "Every choice, every action has led you here, to me, Dracula." Suddenly, the mirrors shattered, and out of each emerged a doppelganger of Blade and Selene, armed and ready, not cybernetically enhanced, but just like them. "Guess we're fighting ourselves now," Blade quipped, spinning his sword in readiness. Selene, loading her guns, replied, "It's about time." The ensuing battle was a dance of blades, bullets, and blood. Each move was met with an equal counter, each strike mirrored perfectly. It was a fight against their own past, their own choices. But with each fallen doppelganger, Blade and Selene felt a surge of power, a reaffirmation of their purpose. Hours felt like minutes, and minutes like seconds. But finally, they stood victorious, the shattered remnants of their mere selves dissipating into the ether. Panting heavily, Blade looked over at Selene, admiration in his eyes. "We made it through." Selene nodded, her gaze firm. "This is just the beginning. We have the space-time continuum to save." And with renewed determination, they ventured further into the labyrinth. Chapter 9. Battle of Realities. Blade and Selene stepped cautiously into the sprawling throne room at the heart of Dracula's tower, their senses on high alert. The vast chamber was illuminated by eerie blue light, emanating from tall, crystalline columns, pulsating with a mixture of ancient magic and modern technology. The atmosphere was dense with anticipation. Their entrance was met with the chilling sight of three familiar faces lying still on the cold, reflective floor: Hannibal King, Abby Whistler, and Frank Drake. Their lifeless eyes stared into nothingness. For a brief moment, both warriors were consumed by grief and anger, but they quickly reeled in their emotions, understanding that this was Dracula's way of playing mind game. "You've come a long way," a voice echoed through the chamber, drawing their attention to the elevated throne where Dracula, now a formidable blend of ancient vampire lord and cybernetic enhancements, sat with an air of supreme confidence. Two relics from past that no longer matters. Blade's fingers tightened around the hilt of his sword, his voice dripping with venom. "We're here to end your reign." Selene, her twin Berettas at the ready, added, "and to send you back to the hell you came from." Dracula smirked. "So much spirit. You both remind me of why I loved conquering your timelines. But you should know that your friends put up a fight." "Not enough, of course," Blade growled. "Enough talk." Without another word, Blade lunged forward, while Selene, in a swift motion, sent a barrage of silver bullets towards the cybernetic vampire. Dracula, with his enhanced reflexes, easily deflected them, creating a force field around himself. The room seemed to ripple, and suddenly, they weren't in the tower anymore. They were on the streets of a futuristic city, neon lights blending with the dark night and towering skyscrapers overshadowing them. It was a surreal transition, like they were thrust into a different dimension altogether. Cyber-lichens, seemingly appearing out of thin air, descended upon them. Blade swiftly took on multiple enemies, slashing and tearing through them with precision, while Selene employed her acrobatic prowess, taking them out from the air. It wasn't long before Dracula himself engaged them. His abilities had amplified. Not only did he possess traditional vampire strengths and powers, but now he could manipulate his surroundings. With a swipe of his hand, he'd create holograms of himself, confusing the two warriors. Selene fired her bullets in rapid succession, hitting multiple targets at once. Blade, the real one, has a slight glitch in his force field when he attacks. Blade, using his enhanced vision, spotted the flaw. He hurled his boomerang, like glaive, which sliced through several of the holograms before it cut through Dracula's shoulder. The vampire lord hissed in pain and retaliated by hurling a ball of energy, throwing Blade off his feet. Selene, using this distraction, jumped high and came crashing down onto Dracula, plunging her silver daggers into his chest. For a brief moment, they had the upper hand, but Dracula, his eyes glowing brighter, unleashed an even more potent surge of energy. The world around Blade and Selene seemed to implode, turning everything into a blinding white light. When the duo regained consciousness, they found themselves in an unfamiliar, dystopian landscape, a world ruled by vampires with no trace of humanity. The realization hit them. They had been sucked into another dimension, Dracula's dimension. As the gravity of their situation dawned on them, Blade looked to Selene. Selene nodded, her face determined. "We'll find a way." Chapter 10. Future Shock. The searing light faded, replaced by a throbbing gray haze. Blade and Selene found themselves standing on a platform that overlooked an endless sea of tall, dark spires reaching out to the heavens. Bright neon glows of blue, red, and green pulsed between the spires like veins of an organism. "This isn't our world," Selene remarked, gazing at the dystopian cityscape. The stars above were different, the night darker and more oppressive. "Looks like Dracula's idea of paradise," Blade mused, adjusting to his new surroundings. The city was advanced beyond comprehension. Hovering vehicles zipped through the air, each leaving a luminous trail. Giant screens on building walls displayed Dracula's emblem, a fanged skull embedded into a circuit board, reminding everyone of his dominion. As they descended from the platform, they witnessed vampires in sleek, metallic armor patrolling the streets. Humans were no longer present. In their place, mechanical drones scurried about, performing menial tasks. In the Underworld universe, we've always had a fragile balance between lichens and vampires. This is... Selene trailed off. Chaos. Blade nodded. "Let's keep a low profile. We need intel." The duo found a shadowy alley and concealed themselves. They intercepted communications from a vampire patrol. Blade tweaked his earpiece to translate. "The final human settlement fell today. All hail Dracula," it crackled. Selene's eyes widened. "Humans are extinct." A cloaked figure approached them. Not extinct, just in hiding. Blade quickly unsheathed his sword, placing it at the stranger's neck. "Who are you?" The figure pushed back its hood to reveal a female vampire with circuitry running along her temples, merging into her raven black hair. "My name is Electra. I rebelled against Dracula's rule." Selene lowered Blade's arm. "Why?" Electra's eyes held a mix of pain and resolve. "He promised us eternal dominion, but he turned our kin into soulless machines, stripping us of our essence. We're not free vampires anymore doing as we please. We are just machines, existing." They moved to a more secluded spot. Electra began explaining the politics of the city. "Dracula rules from the Nexus Tower." She pointed to the tallest spire, pulsing with dark energy. "His elite guard patrol the main sectors. There's a resistance, mainly old world vampires and a few lichens who despise the cybernetic enhancements. We've been waiting for someone, or something to tilt the balance." Blade smirked. "Looks like you found your something." Electra offered a wry smile. "And our someone?" Selene pondered. "We need allies, a base." Electra nodded. "I can take you to our hideout. We've managed to engineer some of Dracula's tech. It might be of use." As they navigated the labyrinthine streets, Blade couldn't help but recall his own universe's struggle against the vampires. This world felt like a reflection of his darkest fear. Selene, sensing Blade's turmoil, whispered, "We'll fix this." He glanced at her, his signature sternness breaking for a moment. No doubt. Arriving at the Resistance hideout, they were greeted with cautious optimism. Old world vampires, lichens, and a few Teksh, modified rebels gathered, whispering among themselves. Inside the dimly lit hideout, Selene's distinctive blue eyes caught the attention of a group of burly lichens huddled in a corner. Their growls echoed through the chamber, heads lowered, eyes locked onto her. The tension in the room grew palpable. One of the older lichens, with streaks of silver in his fur, made the first move, charging toward Selene with a fierce growl. The others quickly followed suit, displaying an instinctual animosity towards her. Before the situation escalated, Elektra stepped in, her arm outstretched, halting the pack. "Enough," she commanded. The older lichen, still partially transformed, hissed at Selene. "Do you know who this is? A death dealer?" Elektra's voice was firm. "She's not the Selene from our dimension. Here, she's our ally." Selene, never one to back down, met the lichen's gaze. "What to do in this world?" The lichen's eyes filled with sorrow. "You tried to broker peace, to bridge a connection between vampires and lichens, but they saw it as a threat. In our world, you were betrayed by your own kind, assassinated while trying to prevent the vampires' ascent to power." A murmur of agreement came from the gathered crowd. There was respect, but also regret. "Still, you nearly exterminated us all," the lichen continued. Selene blinked, processing the revelation. She thought of her daughter, of Michael, of the struggles she'd faced in her own universe. "Every dimension has its tragedies," she whispered, her voice heavy with emotion. The lichen, sensing the weight of her words, reverted to his human form, his features softening. "I'm Leaf," he said, extending a hand. "Everyone here remembers and honors the Selene from our world. We'll fight alongside you as long vampires are the only breed you seek to destroy." Selene took his hand. "Then let's make sure her sacrifice wasn't in vain." Blade and Selene, though out of place, felt an undeniable connection with these beings, united by a common enemy. The stage was set. The battle for the future had just begun. Elektra stepped onto a makeshift platform, drawing the attention of everyone in the room. The dimly lit hideout was filled with all those united in their case. Humans, lichens, and a few rogue vampires, all standing against the cybernetic Dracula's rule. She began, her voice echoing with conviction. "Many of you are aware of the Nexus technology that Dracula has harnessed. It's what has given him an edge, a way to merge technology with the supernatural, making him seemingly invincible." A holographic projection shimmered to life beside her, showcasing intricate diagrams and circuits. "With the help of some brave souls who infiltrated Dracula's tech hubs, we've reverse-engineered a considerable portion of the Nexus tech. We've decoded its architecture, understood its material composition, and even managed to replicate a few of its functions." Murmurs spread through the crowd, a mix of hope and anticipation. Elektra raised her hand, urging them to let her finish. "However, there's a core algorithm, a keystone, if you will, that's eluded us. Without this piece, we can't collapse the system. It's the heart of Dracula's power grid, and it's what we need to target if we're going to end his reign." Blade, who had been listening intently, stepped forward, his red-tinted shades catching the light. Back in my world, we faced advanced takes before, from modified vampire strains to biochemical weapons. The key isn't just understanding the tech, but the mind that created it. Elektra nodded, appreciating Blade's insight. Exactly. The technology is a manifestation of Dracula's ambitions, his desires. If we can get inside his head, anticipate his moves, we might find the weak point we're looking for. As the assembly began to disperse, discussing plans and strategies, a sudden commotion at the entrance of the hideout drew their attention. A disheveled young boy with wild curly hair and ragged clothes burst into the room. His face was smeared with dirt, but his eyes shone brightly with determination. "Let me through. I have information," he shouted as a couple of guards tried to pull him away. Elektra motioned for them to let him go. "Easy. Let him speak." Blade eyed the boy skeptically, but remained silent. Catching his breath, the boy introduced himself. "My name's Jacoby. I've been surviving out there in the streets, observing, always moving. There's something y'all need to know." Elektra stepped down from her platform. "Go on." "I know of a power station. It's in the wastelands, far from here, but it ain't ordinary. I've been tracking its activities way before all this Nexus stuff started. Lights brighter than the sun, sounds that'll make your ears bleed. It's still operational and guarded tighter than anything I've ever seen," Jacoby explained rapidly, urgency in his voice. Blade arched an eyebrow. Why hadn't anyone else noticed or spoken about this? Jacoby shrugged. The wastelands ain't a place for the sane, and most steer clear of anything unusual out there. Plus, with Dracula taking over everything, who would have connected the dots? But I did. Blade is still suspicious of the boy. "What were you doing out there then?" Jacoby looked down at his feet. Somewhat intimidated by the imposing Blade, "My older sister worked there, but I haven't seen her in a long time. I don't even know if she's alive." Selene stepped forward. "If what you say is true, this could be the heart of his operation, or at least a major part of it." Elektra pondered. "It's worth looking into. If Dracula's arrogance is as vast as his ambition, he might not have considered someone discovering this station. It's hidden in plain sight, away from the main hub of his power." Blade nodded. "A central command or a power source. It doesn't matter. If it's important to Dracula, it's a weakness we can exploit." Jacoby, empowered by the attention, declared, "I can guide you there." Elektra smiled at the young boy. "Then welcome to the Resistance, Jacoby. You might just be the key we were looking for." Blade smirked. "Well, I've got a few ideas on how to do that. It won't be easy, but nothing worthwhile ever is." The assembly erupted in cheers and applause. There was a renewed hope in the room, a belief that with combined strength they could reclaim their world from the clutches of the cybernetic Dracula. Chapter 11. The Sabotage. Strange constellations, the likes of which Blade and Selene had never seen, cast an eerie glow over the barren landscape of the wastelands. The Resistance moved quietly, using large hovering platforms that glided silently above the ground. The platforms were relics from the past, modified for stealth and speed. The desolation of the wastelands was palpable, a vast expanse mysteriously devoid of life, almost as if time itself had forgotten it. The vast expanse of wasteland stretched endlessly. As the hovering platforms glided over it, the soft hum of the engines and the muted conversations between the Resistance fighters created an ambience of anticipation. Elektra, her gaze fixed on the horizon, addressed the group, her voice tinged with melancholy. It wasn't always like this. The wastelands, the fear, the perpetual darkness. There was a time when this world thrived. Selene, ever curious about the history of the dimensions she found herself in, prodded her further. What happened? Electra sighed. The vampires. They achieved what they always desired, complete dominance. And for a while, it worked. With no threats left, the world entered a golden age, an era of prosperity, a century where there was an uneasy truce between humans and vampires. No wars, no uprisings. The cities were one of architecture and technology, gleaming towers touching the skies. Humans worked in harmony with the vampires, some even volunteering to serve them in return for protection. Blade raised an eyebrow, skepticism evident in his eyes. Sounds too good to be true. It was, Electra admitted, until the Nexus. A mysterious force or entity, we never knew which, that brought with it the advanced tech we see today. Suddenly, the power balance shifted. The vampires, with their newfound capabilities, didn't need humans anymore. The assimilation began. Vampires began turning humans not out of necessity, but out of ambition, and those who resisted were annihilated. Jacoby, who had been listening intently, piped in, "My grandparents told me stories of how they used to play outside under the sun. Now, I can't even imagine what that would be like." Electra nodded. The Nexus tech allowed the vampires to block out the sun, eternal night, the perfect environment for them. And with that, our world plunged into darkness, both literally and figuratively. A deep silence settled over the group, interrupted only by the occasional hum of the hovering platforms. Selene, after a few moments of reflection, broke the silence. "So, Dracula is behind the Nexus?" Electra shook her head. "Not directly. The Nexus existed before him, but he saw its potential. He used its technology, merged it with magic, and turned himself into the god, like being he is now. With the Nexus tech under his control, no one stood a chance." Blade clenched his fists, determination in his voice. "Then we take down the Nexus. We bring back the sun, and we bring back hope." Electra looked at him, still not knowing quite what to make of him. "I've never heard of a vampire who welcomed the sun. I'm a half-vampire. I can walk in the day." Electra and others nearby gasped in shock. Selene responded, "So can I." "Wow," Electra stuttered. Jacoby pointed ahead. "It's coming up." As they approached the coordinates given by Jacoby, the silhouette of the power station emerged on the horizon. Massive towers of gleaming metal stood surrounded by electrified fences and complex security systems. But what drew their attention the most were the guards. Colossal lichens, their size and ferocity magnified by some twisted Nexus technology, pacing the perimeter. They were awe-inspiring mountainous constructs of metal, fur, and flesh, several times larger than the largest lichen anyone had ever seen, their eyes glowing with an eerie blue hue. Selene took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment. Beside her, Electra tightened her grip on a sleek, silver sword, its edge gleaming even in the dim light. Selene looked through her binoculars, her face turning serious. "These aren't ordinary guards. We won't take them down easily." Jacoby gulped beside her. "Told you it was tight security." Blade, checking his weapon, said, "It's a good thing we're not going through the front door then." Electra organized the resistance members quickly. "Remember the plan. We draw their attention, make as much noise as possible. Blade and his team will slip in unnoticed." Selene climbed onto one of the platforms, raising her voice to be heard. "We'll give them a fight they won't forget. Let's show Dracula he's not invincible." A murmur of agreement passed through the ranks. Spirits were high and the energy palpable. Blade nodded at Jacoby. "Lead the way, kid." Using a handheld device, Jacoby guided Blade and a select few through the shadows toward a concealed entrance that led to the sewer systems beneath the station. To think we're willingly charging into this, Electra mused, glancing at the impending danger. Selene smirked, her eyes steely. We faced worse. Remember that. With a nod, Electra signaled for the platforms to descend. As they touched down, the resistance fighters quickly disembarked, forming a makeshift battle line. Before them, the vast horde of cyber Lycans began to converge. A discord of roars echoed through the air as the cyber Lycans charged. Despite their size, their movements were fluid and swift, a deadly combination of nature's raw power and advanced technology. Selene took the lead, her dual Berettas blazing. The bullets, specially designed with silver and UV, tore into the thick hides of the advancing cyber Lycans. Many simply shrugged off the impacts, their cybernetic enhancements healing the damage almost instantly. Electra, on the other hand, moved with the grace of a dancer. Her sword sliced through the air, cutting down any cyber Lycan that got too close. But even her agility couldn't prevent the sheer weight of numbers. The resistance fighters, a mix of vampires, Lycans, and humans, followed their lead. Vampires used their agility and strength to tackle the gigantic foes while the Lycans transformed, adding their own brute force to the fray. Humans, equipped with powerful weaponry, provided cover fire, trying to keep the cyber Lycans at bay. But the casualties began to mount. A powerful swipe from a cyber, Lycan sent a group of resistance fighters flying. Another grabbed a Lycan and crushed him with ease. Everywhere, the ground was littered with fallen comrades, their sacrifices serving as a grim reminder of the stakes. Below, Blade and his team navigated the dimly lit tunnels. The sewers were old, remnants of a time long past. The stench was overpowering, but the team pressed on, knowing the fate of their world rested on their shoulders. They reached a junction where Jacoby pointed to an access ladder. That leads straight into the heart of the power station. Once you're in, I have no idea what you'll find. Good luck. Blade nodded, looking around at his team. We're close. Stay sharp and stay silent. Let's end this. The two-pronged assault continued, one above and one below. Above ground, Electra, witnessing the carnage and casualties mounting, let out a primal scream, tapping into a deep reservoir of power. Her eyes glowed with a fierce light as she unleashed a wave of energy, temporarily stunning several of the colossal foes. Using this brief respite, she quickly darted, delivering fatal blows to their vulnerable points. Selene, sensing an opportunity, shifted tactics. Aim for their joints, she yelled. Disable their mobility. The resistance fighters adjusted their focus, targeting the knees, elbows, and necks of the cyber Lycans. Slowly, the tide began to turn, but within moments, dozens more of these gigantic beasts appear, circling the resistance on all sides. Damn it! Hurry up, Blade! Selene exclaimed as she cut down several. The dimly lit bowels of the power station buzzed with an uncanny fusion of organic and mechanical energy. The air was dense, reeking of electricity and cold metal. Blade led his small team through a vast underground tunnel, their movements quiet and synchronized. The echoes of water droplets and distant machinery were the only sounds accompanying them. As they neared the central core, they found themselves in a massive chamber. A colossal pulsating energy orb sat at its center, surrounded by cyber vampire scientists. Their fingers danced over holographic interfaces, while others extracted energies and fed the glowing monstrosity. Blade signaled his team to spread out. Each took a position, weapons at the ready. "Time to cut the power," Blade whispered to himself, his katana glinting menacingly. In a coordinated strike, his team lunged. The cyber vampire scientists barely had a chance to react before they were cut down. As the last of them fell, Blade and his team began planting the bombs. The beeping of the timer, a constant reminder of the limited time they had. But it wasn't long before alarms started blaring. Large doors at the far end of the chamber began to open, revealing the gigantic forms of cyber, Lycan guards. Their eyes locked onto the intruders, teeth bared, ready to kill. The ensuing battle was brutal. Every member of Blade's team fought valiantly, but the cyber, Lycan's immense strength and resilience were overwhelming. One by one, they fell. Leaf, a burly vampire with a history of resistance, found himself cornered. Seeing Blade in trouble, he unleashed a powerful cry, drawing the attention of the cyber Lycans towards him. "Blade, go!" he roared. Blade tried to fight his way to Leaf, but the Lycans closed in, their sheer numbers creating an impenetrable barrier. "Leaf!" Leaf smiled, blood dripping from his mouth. "Go save the world, Daywalker." Blade nodded, understanding the sacrifice. Dashing towards the tunnel entrance, he grabbed Jacoby, who had been waiting anxiously. "We need to move, now." Emerging from the underground, the chaos of the battle outside met them. Blade's voice boomed over the commotion. "Retreat! Get to the platforms!" Selene and Electra, both battered and tired, rounded up the few surviving members of their assault. Their numbers were heartbreaking, but there was no time to mourn. Everyone scrambled, easily fitting on just one platform. As they began to rise, Blade reached into his pocket, pulling out the detonator. He looked back at the power station, its eerie lights flickering ominously. With a firm press, the entire horizon turned a blazing red, the shockwave following shortly after, sending ripples across the wasteland. The survivors watched in silent awe as the platform sped away, the weight of their actions and the hope for a better future filling their hearts. The platform sped through the crimson-tinged sky, the thrum of its engines the only sound in the aftermath of the explosion. The survivors huddled together, trying to catch their breath. Amid the group, Selene was supporting Electra, who seemed to be limping. Blade, now closer, saw the extent of Electra's injuries. Her side was drenched in blood, the fabric of her attire torn away, revealing a ghastly wound in her abdomen. "Electra!" Selene exclaimed, trying to stabilize her comrade. "Why didn't you say anything?" Electra grimaced, her usually fierce eyes clouded with pain. "No time for that now. We had a mission." Blade approached, examining the wound. "We need to get you patched up. This looks bad." Electra smirked weakly. "You think I haven't had worse?" She took a deep breath, clearly trying to push through the pain. "We need to press on." As they navigated the twisted remains of the city, it was clear that their assault on the power station had an effect. The omnipresent glow of Nexus technology that once dominated the landscape was now dimmed, flickering uncertainly. The fortress of Dracula, previously pulsing with power, looked vulnerable for the first time. Jacoby, staring out at the scene, muttered, "Look, it worked. We might just have a shot at this." Electra, though weakened, straightened up as the hideout came into view. "I won't be staying behind," she declared, her voice firm. "I began this fight, and I intend to see it through." Selene gave her a worried look. "You're in no condition." "I'm in the perfect condition," Electra interrupted. "I've got something to fight for, and I won't die hiding." Blade nodded in agreement. "Then let's take the fight to Dracula." As the platform adjusted its course toward Dracula's fortress, a newfound determination filled the hearts of the resistance. They were few, but they were fierce, and they would stop at nothing to reclaim their world. Chapter 12. Final Confrontation. Blade's hands were stained, not just with the blood of his enemies, but with the weight of the task at hand. The hovering platform continued its descent into the heart of Dracula's stronghold. Selene, hair swaying like a raven's wing in the wind, stood beside him, her eyes locked on the fortress. Electra, despite her injuries, took point, her determined gaze meeting every eye in their small band of survivors. "We've come this far," she began, her voice echoing over the platform's hum. "Against odds we couldn't have imagined. We're not just fighting for our world, but for every reality Dracula aims to corrupt." Blade nodded, drawing his sword, the blade glinting under the crimson hue of the sky. "Every vampire, every lichen, every hybrid we've taken down has led us to this moment." Jacoby, the young human who had been instrumental in their success thus far, adjusted the gadgetry on his wrist. The power station was just the start. The heart of Dracula's network lies inside that fortress. We take it down, and we cripple his forces, possibly shutting down Nexus technology in every single one of his minions. Electra shot Jacoby an appreciative glance, her respect for the street smart kid evident. "Then let's not keep the king waiting." As the fortress loomed closer, they could make out the massive doors, guarded by the hybrid behemoths. Selene loaded her guns with the last of her silver bullets, the weight of every shot a reminder of the battles they had already endured. "I'm almost out of ammo," she said. Blade nodded, remembering his prior encounters with Deacon Frost and the challenges posed by him, felt an itch at the back of his mind. "Dracula has something planned for us," he said. "It won't just be a straight-up fight." Electra grimaced, touching her wound briefly. "Make no mistake, this is evil incarnate. If there's a trick, he's gonna use it." The platform touched down, and the confrontation began. The colossal cyber lichens charged, their roars echoing through the city, now tinted red from the power station explosion. Electra, summoning the last of her strength, took on two of them, her blade dancing between their attacks. Blade and Selene moved as one, a synchronized dance of death, parrying and striking with precision. Jacoby, utilizing his tech, unleashed a pulse that disoriented some of the hybrids, buying them time. After what felt like hours, the doors to the fortress creaked open. A voice, unmistakably Dracula's, echoed out. "You have proven persistent daywalker and death dealer, but your journey ends here." Stepping out, the cybernetic Dracula looked even more terrifying up close. His eyes glowed a chilling blue, and the tech that infused his body hummed with power. Blade lunged, but Dracula deflected him with ease. Selene fired, but her bullets merely bounced off. Dracula laughed, a sound devoid of any warmth. "You think mere weapons can defeat me?" With a wave of his hand, he summoned an army of cyber vampires, their eyes glowing red with menace. It was chaos. Electra, already weakened, faced off against multiple foes. Jacoby's tech worked overtime, trying to hold off the onslaught. Blade and Selene fought with everything they had. Suddenly, a burst of light cut through the battle. Whistler and David, from yet another timeline, had arrived. Armed with new tech and weapons, they joined the fray, evening the odds. Dracula, seeing the tide turning, roared in frustration. "Enough!" Unleashing a wave of energy, he knocked everyone off their feet. "This is my reality." But Blade was undeterred. Rising, he locked eyes with Dracula. Not for long. Charging forward with Selene at his side, the final battle between the Daywalker, the Death Dealer, and the cybernetic Dracula commenced. The fortress trembled, the sky above echoing with the sounds of combat as the fate of multiple dimensions hung in the balance. Whistler, eyes crinkled with age but sharp as ever, rushed to Blade's side, his face etched with concern. "Hang in there, kid," he grunted, blasting away enemies swarming Blade with a shotgun. Blade coughed, his voice raspy. "Which dimension are you from, Whistler?" The old hunter's lips curled into a wry smile. "One where you don't let me die." Selene, her lithe form stained with Dracula's ichor, exchanged blows with a couple of straggling cyber vampires. David fought by her side, his movements a blend of grace and brutal efficiency. As they cut down their foes, David shouted over the din, "Selene, we started receiving telepathic messages across dimensions, ones that Dracula was just starting to reach. They haven't fallen yet." Selene's blue eyes widened in realization. Every moment counted. But before she could respond, a gut-wrenching scream shattered the air. Jacoby, the street smart kid who had been invaluable to their mission, lay crumpled, Dracula's hand embedded in his chest. Electra, despite her earlier injuries, lunged at Dracula, but was effortlessly swatted aside, splitting her in half. The battlefield erupted once more as a new wave of cyber, vampires and cyber, lycans surged forth, their eyes devoid of life, solely driven by their programming. But Selene noticed something. Their movements were sluggish, less coordinated. She yelled, pointing it out, "Their power source is waning. We need to keep pushing." As if to defy her claim, Dracula roared, the ground trembling beneath him. He gathered the last reserves of his energy, releasing it in a massive pulse that knocked everyone back, leaving them disoriented. Seizing the opportunity, he lunged at Blade, his metallic arm piercing straight through the Daywalker's chest. Pain radiated through Blade, but with a final surge of strength, he hurled his glaive. It spun, its trajectory unwavering, and sliced clean through Dracula's head, bisecting it. Dracula staggered, his systems glitching, a fusion of supernatural and technological anguish. Selene, Whistler, and David wasted no time. With a primal scream, they descended upon him, tearing into him with savage ferocity. Every ounce of their strength poured into him, ensuring his end. As the dust settled and Dracula's remnants lay scattered, an eerie silence blanketed the battlefield. The rifts above, once threatening to tear the world apart, now shimmered weakly. The task at hand was clear: seal the rifts and restore order to the myriad dimensions affected by Dracula's ambition. Blade, despite his injuries, managed a smirk. "I've been through worse." He looked up at Selene, a nod of appreciation, but not without good company. Selene's lips curled into a slight smile. "We're not done yet, Daywalker. The rifts still need sealing." Whistler grunted, examining the tech salvaged from the fortress. With Dracula gone, the nexus between dimensions is destabilizing. We need to act fast. Chapter 15. New Beginnings. The doors to Dracula's chambers were massive, ornately designed with etchings that seemed to shift and pulse with a life of their own. Blade, Selene, Whistler, and David approached cautiously, every sense on high alert. Inside, the chamber was vast and opulent, with towering walls adorned with tapestries that depicted various dimensions and timeliness. Dominating the center was a massive, intricate control unit, a tangle of futuristic technology and archaic mysticism. It pulsed, a rhythmic heartbeat that was undoubtedly the nexus point controlling the rifts. David, His eyes scanning the arcane glyphs and circuits remarked, This is how he did it. Manipulated time, controlled dimensions. This is the heart of his empire. Whistler nodded, pulling out tools from his bag. And this is where we end it. But as they approached, the control unit flared to life, creating barriers of shimmering energy that blocked their path. A voice, synthesized and hollow, echoed throughout the chamber. Intruders detected. Defense systems activated. Blade drew his sword, eyes narrowed, while Selene readied her dual pistols. They exchanged a determined glance. No more words were needed. Cyber ghouls, remnants of Dracula's defense system, materialized from the shadows, their feral eyes locking onto the intruders. The ensuing battle was fierce, with the heroes cutting down wave after wave of enemies, their skills and determination unwavering. As Selene and Blade kept the horde at bay, Whistler and David focused on the control unit, trying to find a way to disable it. Each barrier they broke revealed another, the system adapting and countering their every move. Suddenly, Blade, in a burst of inspiration, hurled his glaive directly at the core of the control unit. It spun rapidly, creating a vortex of energy that began to destabilize the barriers. Seizing the moment, Selene unleashed a barrage of gunfire, targeting the now vulnerable points. Whistler hurled an entire bag of grenades at the unit. With a resonating boom, the control unit exploded, sending shockwaves throughout the chamber. The entire city was plunged into darkness. The cyber ghouls, cut off from their power source, disintegrated into nothingness. The four heroes emerged from the chamber, their eyes drawn to the sky. The rifts, once a menacing scar across the heavens, began to close. One by one, they sealed, leaving only the stars in their wake. Whistler let out a relieved sigh. It's over. Blade, his usual stoic demeanor giving way to a rare smile, replied, So what now? Either we get sent back to our dimensions or we die. As dawn painted the sky, the four stood in silent contemplation, aware of the magnitude of their victory. The weight of parting was palpable among them. David, looking around the restored city, remarked Dracula wanted to conquer all realities. Instead, he brought them together. Whistler, his rugged face softened by emotion, approached Blade. Yeah, I know in my world. You didn't leave an old man to do all the heavy lifting, he quipped, a hint of a smile touching his lips. Blade grinned, clasping Whistler's hand firmly. In any world, I couldn't have done it without you. Whistler nodded, his gaze lingering on Blade for a moment longer, communicating volumes in silence. David stepped forward, his blue eyes locking onto Selene's. We may have different histories, different memories, but in this fight, we forged something new, something real. I won't forget that. Selene reached out, touching David's face gently. Neither will I. Blade cleared his throat, breaking the momentary stillness as he noticed his own body glimmering as well as the others. It's time, he stated simply. Selene nodded. May our paths cross again, Daywalker, she offered with a nod of respect. And may the shadows keep you safe, Dealer, Blade responded. As the rifts began to pulsate, a soft iridescent light enveloped each of the warriors. The once chaotic dance of the dimensions settled into a harmonic rhythm. Selene's form shimmered in a cascade of silvery, blue drawing her back to her darkened world of vampires and lichens. Whistler radiated in a warm golden hue, transporting him to a reality where battles were yet to be won. David, surrounded by a luminescent white aura, felt a gentle pull towards his own timeline where responsibilities awaited. and Blade, with a crimson gleam surrounding him, was ushered back to his cityscape of nocturnal hunts and unending wars. As the last glimmers faded, the rifts sealed, restoring balance and order to the multiverse, leaving behind tales of heroes who once transcended the confines of their realities and conquered the ultimate evil,